Welcome to the Recover You podcast with Kylene and Patrick Terhune. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Recover You. I am so excited today to introduce you to Jackie Newman. She is a certified partner trauma therapist, speaker, and teacher in the field of sexual betrayal trauma. Jackie has helped many partners feel validation in their stories and experience healing from their trauma. Through her own healing journey, she's able to provide her clients with her experience, strength, and hope, along with extensive training and understanding of the effects that sexual betrayal can have on a partner. She is also a betrayal recovery coach for TaraHope Alliance, our nonprofit that we are raising awareness around this month. And so I'm just really excited to have this conversation. Welcome, Jackie.
Yay! Thanks, Kylene. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. When I reached out, you had mentioned that I was like, hey, like, what do you want to talk about? I really want to make this something that is something you can easily and enjoyably talk about for, hours on end. Not that we're going to talk for hours on end, but what's that thing, And you were like, preparation for disclosure. And I love that because Patrick and I in episode 2 shared our personal disclosure story. So we shared our story and kind of our experience with that and, best practices that, we kind of gathered and all that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I don't really think we've gone I don't think we've had a specific episode dedicated to prepping for it and all that's included and everything like that. So I'm glad that you brought this topic up. It's so important. And I think what I'd like to start with is, why do you think that disclosure is such an important step for healing?
I love that question. First and foremost, I think about my own experience with it. As a partner, I was so used to the kitchen table disclosures, right? Which are so damaging and so often even more traumatic for the partner because we get like bits and pieces of like just enough detail to like create a scenario in our head, right? That like just plagues us. And so I just remember as a partner experiencing that, but then going through my own full disclosure with my husband, it just felt so different, even though it was still hard and still, traumatic in some ways, in a lot of ways. I had never felt so supported and prepared on my own end. And to walk into this, one with professionals who I trusted them. I knew that they had done their own work, right? That they had been through this process and that they could, more than anything, that they could hold this really delicate space with me. And that they weren't just for me as a partner, they were also for my husband too, right? And both therapists just really held that space beautifully. And my therapist and my sponsor both really kind of helped prep me for that. So I could go into this disclosure with a strong core. I talk about this to my own clients, developing a strong core, a strong kind of, I had the tools that I needed to go into this and to be able to hear everything that my husband was going to share with me. But yet with this beautiful kind of protective inner core and strength that I did not have before. And it felt very, I felt very cared for and I felt prepared for it, which was completely different than any of those other disclosures that I was not prepared for.
That's such a good point because the whole idea of disclosure is to create to give you the information in the safest way possible. So you're getting information that is most likely traumatic and you may have pieces that you still don't know being shared in disclosure, but creating the space and the grounding and the support around it so that you can kind of have the tools and the resources and the people and the community right next to you, right? And that is huge. And also something, as you were talking, I was thinking is kind of reiterating the idea that the disclosure is really beneficial for both people, because if you think about the addict side, right, it's such an important piece for them to fully comb through and begin understanding their behaviors, and then be willing to be vulnerable and honest, like total honesty, right? Like what in a lifestyle that is so much about hiding and secrecy and lies and shame, like the process of taking time to create a document to be completely honest with their spouse is huge, right? Like that's a big step of healing for them, I think. And then for the betrayed partner, just like what you were saying, like having it done in a way where it was intentional and it wasn't just this accidental, well, it fell out of his mouth or you checked his email or
all the ways
that we've all done, right? Like, yeah. I don't know if anyone has actually ever made it to disclosure without some sort of trickle. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even think that's possible. But the idea is, once you have this set that you are managing the information leading up to that, you're kind of holding on, you're waiting for disclosure so that you can do it all at the same time as much as possible. But yeah, I think the benefit for both is probably equal in terms of moving the healing forward. And my opinion would be that if you're going to reconcile with a partner with the idea of optimal health, that this would be a required step.
Yeah, I agree. It is, like we were saying, as much as it is a tender, really difficult space for a partner, I agree too that it is such a vulnerable, tender spot for the acting out partner. But for them to be able to do that in a space that feels safe for them to be vulnerable, right, is so imperative. That's why, like, I'm really intentional about working with the addicts therapist as far as disclosure prep goes. And when they come in my space, I'm also as I'm with my partner 100%, but I really try to attune to the one who's sharing the disclosure because it is so vulnerable. Like I want them to feel my presence with them and my support with them too, because they are doing this thing that is probably the hardest thing that they've ever had to do in their life. And that takes courage and it takes work and it takes so much vulnerability. And so I want them to know that I honor that process for them too, because they put a ton of work into it and a ton of vulnerability and heart. And that's terrifying. Like I can't imagine being so vulnerable in that way. And so, it's such a tender, sacred, difficult process.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's why having people guide you through it is so important. So what do you think are some of the best tips when you're talking about preparation for disclosure? And I know you primarily are going to be working with the betrayed partners on this, but feel free either side to talk about, what do you think is important here?
First and foremost, I think it is imperative that the partner do a bit of their own trauma work first around
the betrayed partner.
The betrayed partner, yes. Okay. So we'll say betrayed partner and acting out partner. How about we do that? Yeah. That they both, but the betrayed partner have a bit of their own work, their own trauma work first. Kind of understanding up to this point, what does that look like? How have they survived? How have they coped? How are they coming into this right now? And kind of identifying what support they have. And I'm very intentional. Before I get a partner into disclosure, I want to make sure that they have some kind of community around them. Whether it's, a recovery community, S&On, some 12 steps, Celebrate Recovery. I really, really encourage them to seek out other people who have been through full therapeutic disclosure. Someone who knows what it's like to sit in that. And so I will often try to get them connected with someone who has been through it, encourage them to go to their S&On community. So that's kind of a integral piece of it that I try on the front end of disclosure to make sure that they are connected somehow.
Well, and that phase that you're talking about, when we're going to go through discovery, that whole first phase of recovery for the betrayed partner is safety building. It's creating safety, it's creating stability. And part of that is deciding and creating, like, who is my community and who are my safe people.
Right.
And a couple weeks ago, after the airing of this, a couple weeks ago, Patrick and I did an episode on community and the importance of it for recovery. And it's a really good point that you're making here. That is because I talked about there's community within people that know exactly what you're going through because they've experienced it. And then there's also benefit to community in people that are completely outside the betrayal community, but they have empathy for you and can kind of remind you that there's a life outside of betrayal, right? And so, but this particularly is a situation where it's going to be very helpful to have the conversations and the support from people whenever possible. And I know across the country, this is tough, right? Like, there aren't enough coaches and therapists in every city, and there aren't enough groups in every state. So I know this isn't always possible, but whenever possible, if you're going through something like a disclosure, to be able, this is a particular instance where sharing similarities and talking to somebody that has been through it and their benefit, how did they feel and what did they find were the best practices, and did they sleep apart that night, did they what did they do and how did they feel, and were you happy afterwards, were you sad afterwards, what was your experience like, and being able to have a safe space for that, I think you're right, it's going to be important.
Yeah, so true. That community is imperative. I even, like, going into disclosure, I always make sure, like, that my partners, my betrayed partners, have someone that they check in with before, who is like recovery community, and someone like right after, as soon as they leave my office, like, who you're going to call before, who you're going to call after, who are you going to go to dinner with, right? Who knows this? And I love that too, the idea of kind of community in both senses. Right, that we have community within the betrayal trauma world, and then outside of that, because I agree, there are so many benefits to both, and both communities are sacred, and that extra level of vulnerability that other partners share can be really, really healing. So that, first and foremost, like, I always want to know, who are your people? Who do you feel safe with? Because there's just kind of a different level of safety there. So and
like we were mentioning too, like, sometimes it's really hard. So many people come and they're like, I can't find a therapist in my area. I can't do, I can't. There's just not enough, and there's, for whatever reason, this is still not something that is, unfortunately, widely accessible everywhere. And so, if you don't have access to that community, there are online communities. There are different resources, right? But then also, for that person to come with you, maybe there is a really empathetic family member or friend that you have, like, on speed dial after, and so just, making it work for your situation. But that's going to be important for sure. What other things do you think are, big important things to think about as you're prepping for disclosure?
I really love, one of my favorite things to do, just kind of in the particular type of therapy that I do. I love to lead guided meditations. I love doing visualizations with my clients.
I love this about you, by the way. When I just, like, side note, sorry to interrupt you, but, like, when I interviewed Jackie for TaraHope, she came highly recommended, so I was sure she was awesome. But I loved our conversation, because I really asked you a lot of questions. I was like, well, what do you do in this situation? How would you navigate this? And you were just, like, so great in all of the ways that you approach it, and so empathetic and so kind. But I also really find that it's very important that people have multiple modalities, multiple ways, because every client is different, right? And something that works with one person is not going to work with another. So anyway, sorry to pause, but I love this idea of visualizations and meditations. I know you're going to go into experiential therapy, so dig in.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you. It's sometimes I think it's kind of a weird thing that I do. It's not just talk therapy, but I do these things because they have been helpful for me. And so specifically, I think about the guided meditations. Something that was helpful for me in my own disclosure, I can't remember if I told you about this last time, but my sponsor and I had done some kind of higher power work. Like, okay, what does God look like to you? How does he show up? And I had some church trauma. I'd had some religious trauma before. And so I was in the space of kind of reworking what that looked like for myself. And so in that, I started to develop this idea of what God looked like to me. And the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh my gosh, no way. No. Okay, because I do the same thing. So I do something similar, right? We do resource.
Okay,
we call it resourcing, right? If we're going to go into a situation, we have resource. Okay,
absolutely.
My God resource was Aslan.
No way, girl. Okay, I have a tattoo of a lion on my ankle.
No,
because
no. Oh my gosh. But does that not speak to how brilliant C.S. Lewis was? Because why? Like it's an animal, but to me, Aslan is the epitome of like the God representation, because he's strong and he's powerful and he could totally protect you, but he's also this thing that like can nurture and love and support you, right? It's like it somehow encompasses, it somehow encompasses all the things that's hard to encompass about God, right? Like all his,
it's like this gentle, like it's the both and, right? He's gentle and he's powerful and he can, oh my gosh.
I love this.
That's amazing.
Okay, keep going with your story.
Okay, so when I thought about that, like I had that visual of just this beautiful lion protecting me and walking with me. And one part of my again, like resourcing, was I found kind of a safe sanctuary that I would go to as I would mentally and emotionally try to prep for disclosure. I found this little place outside of, or it's actually in a suburb in Nashville. It's called Radnor Lake. It is this huge park with this gorgeous lake in the middle of it. But I would go there early in the morning. And I did this before disclosure day. I very specifically remember I got out of my car and I had done this kind of prep work of really visualizing what God looked like to me. And I just very vividly remember seeing this giant lion like Aslan beside me. And it's like I got out of my car that morning and I started walking down this path that led to this clearing where you could see the lake. And it just naturally happened where like I could see that lion beside me and he walked down that path with me and just stood there with me, like silent but strong and gentle, as I just kind of looked out and prayed and thought about disclosure. And having that visual beside me where I could just like, it was so real to me. I felt like I could reach out and touch it. And so that has never left me. Everywhere I went that day, I imagined that lion going with me. I went to get a massage that morning. And that was a whole story in itself. Just the healing work that
moving that energy before disclosure. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and the therapist like knew I think she was attuned to what I was about to go into. So that was crazy. But I imagined that lion sitting outside that door and just like very protective. And then going into disclosure, I had shared this with my therapist, this imagery. And, we were in the room prepping, and my husband and his therapist were in the other room. And I sat down in the room with her, and that lion was there. And then as we were getting ready for disclosure, I imagined like that lion waiting at the door, like waiting for me to be ready. And it's like I had this image of that lion kind of coming in between me and sitting down in between me and my husband, just so gently, but yet strong. Yeah. And my husband's therapist, right before the disclosure letter started, he looked at me and he said, "Do you want a pillow? Do you want like a grounding pillow to hold on to?" And I said, "Yes, please. Absolutely." And Kylene, he brings me this giant pillow. It was just fur, like fur.
No.
And I just started crying.
It's like a lion's mane.
Therapist, it was like I could feel this lion, and it was
Yeah.
the weight of it was so grounding, and I
Mm.
could feel it, and it helped me visualize it even more. And so, as my husband was sharing the disclosure, I just remember feeling the presence of that, like being able to visualize it and see it. And then there were moments when, like, where I could have heard things and taken them like internally to be about me, right?
Mhm.
And gone into my own shame, or I, could have gotten really angry at my husband. But in those moments, it's like that lion, I saw him stand up and just give out this giant roar. It's like the energy that was within me.
Yeah.
I saw it manifest kind of in this lion, but not in an angry sense, like at my husband, but just at the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would settle again.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you that having that visual protected me in such a beautiful and sacred way. And I think protected like my relationship with my husband. I could show up in a way that was grounded.
Mm.
Right. And it wasn't about me and who I was, but it was about the healing that had to occur, the things that had to occur to lead to healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that really long story, but to share, it's important for me to help my clients get a good visual, like, again, creating that strong core, whether it is a lion for you, whether it's like a bubble that feels protective,
Mm-hmm.
or like, is it Jesus coming into the room and sitting with you, or is it, some other person who can support? Like, what does that look like? And how can you invite that into the room with you to help be a resource, right? To help protect. Yeah. So I do a lot of groundwork with that. We do a lot of guided imagery. I really try to find out who is important for my client, like where do they get their support, their higher power, like what does that look like for them? And we kind of work on, practicing that, like practicing that visual. So that's one thing.
I love that.
Yeah, and then in that, I got my tattoo of my lion on my ankle. It goes with me everywhere now.
That's so great. That's so cool. Well, and also just how God works, like in the background, like that therapist probably didn't know that the lion was your safe space, right? And but the pillow representing like the fur on its head, like what a cool, like how many things had to happen in the background at what point in time, how many years prior for that to happen to support you, right? Like those things are just like so cool to me, because it's like you can't make that stuff up.
Exactly.
Like you can't orchestrate that, there's something behind the scenes that it's those small things that kind of remind you, I think, that, he is there even when, and I don't know what your experience was through this. God and I had a very tumultuous relationship. The year of betrayal, right? There's a lot of anger, and I'd been through a lot of other trauma in my life, and I felt like I always maintained my faith, and I was always faithful, and I was good, and so then this happened, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, right. Yes.
I was. I was angry. I was very angry. And so, it really is those small things that kind of come back, and you're like, oh, wait, like he is still there. And the thing that, I've kind of said before is like God is the epitome of like a safe relationship, right? So he's not going to gaslight you, and he's not going to force you to be in a relationship that you don't want to be in. So he's just going to sit there and safely wait for you and provide the safety that we all actually need. And so he's so good about demonstrating what that looks like. And then he'll just kind of like throw these little reminders in there, like, I'm still here. I still love you. You might be yelling at me right now, but like, hello, And so I feel like that, the pillow is such a great representation of that. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's beautiful the way God shows up like that. I call it, like, in the work that I do in preparation and in even the kind of the experiential work, like sometimes we call it being in flow.
Yeah.
With God. Like if I get something in my stomach where it's like, okay, like, I don't know, like, Jackie, go get a furry pillow for this client, right?
Yes.
Like, rather than being like, what? That doesn't make sense. Why would I do that? Like, but if I get that feeling in my gut, just going with it and trusting that it is from God, right? That it's like this constant, I'm constantly downloading, right, from him. And I trust that whatever that feeling is in my stomach is from him, because that's what as partners we learn to abandon, right? We learn to abandon that feeling in our gut, which I think that feeling in our gut for me is also my connection with God.
Yeah. That deeper, that inner knowing, that higher perspective. Yeah. Like it's sort of like the eternal knowingness or something like that. Like, and other people might just say, oh, it's on my conscience, or like, it's what, but yeah, I think there is a higher, connection to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's part of the work is recognizing how often I would abandon that as a partner. And just out of, attempts to people please or fix or anticipate or, just abandon that gut feeling like, oh, it's fine. It's nothing to worry about, right? Like, or if my partner was telling me, you don't know what you're talking about, everything's fine, right? We abandon that sense of, no, there's something stirring.
Like, wait a second.
Yeah. And so I think that can go just in a couple ways, right? Like whether we abandon self for that reason, or I just get disconnected from that. And so I love that part of my work gets to be helping partners connect back to that. And that's, again, I go back to building a strong core. And that's what I think about, right? That's what I'm trying to teach when I say building a strong core. I want my partners to really learn to stay connected to themselves. And I think when we stay connected to ourselves, we stay connected to God. So,
yeah.
I was just talking about that with a client, so it's fresh in my brain. But like,
well,
I can keep that. I can show up anywhere and everywhere with a strong core, right? Because I know that I'm safe and I'm connected. So
yeah, it's really the healing process of coming back to your beliefs and your values, and getting in total alignment with who you are, so that you can truly show up authentically you. And you mentioned people pleasing, right? Like so often, because I'm a recovering people pleaser. It's a struggle for me. And, it really is. It's hard. Because, on the conscious level, you're like, well, I just want to make people happy. But on the subconscious level, it's really more about managing the situation so that you are happy. And, right. And that you're creating the outcome, and you that's manipulation, and we shouldn't do that. Our job is to show up authentically as who we are. And to know what that means and what that looks like, and have integrity with that. And then it's their job to do the same. And if there's an issue, it's your responsibility to like bring it up. Right. And otherwise you just interact. But that's hard, right? Because we've been, programmed otherwise. Right. Yeah. Maya Angelou stated, "I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver." TaraHope is a nonprofit that is on a mission to support women experiencing and recovering from sexual betrayal trauma. We do this by providing education and resources, as well as connecting them with and paying for practitioners who guide and assist them through the recovery process so that they can lead happy and fulfilling lives again. If you are interested in supporting this nonprofit organization, here are a few ways to consider doing this. Number 1, pray that we connect with the women who need us most. Pray for all the women who are granted scholarships that they find true healing. Pray for our coaches that they have wisdom in every session. Please pray for me as I continue to lead in an area that is unfamiliar territory and, to be honest, kind of intimidates me. Pray for the right people to be led to TaraHope so that we can connect and grow into an organization that has an impact across the country. This includes bringing on a CEO, marketing specialist, fundraising specialist, and social media manager, to name a few of the people we would love to have in our team moving forward. 2, please consider sharing this podcast with pastors, churches, friends who might be interested, therapists or counselors who have a heart to help others, or even sharing a screenshot or audio clip on social media. Anyone you think that might be interested in learning that this organization exists. Number 3, please consider donating. One 6-month scholarship ranges from $3,000 to $3,600, and $150 would cover one session with a TaraHope coach. Number 4, And finally, if you are someone who is feeling called to help us grow, please reach out to us to let us know in what way you might want to participate. I mentioned earlier a few areas we need support. Someone who has experience running nonprofits, someone interested in running social media, someone good at marketing, etc. Honestly, whether you donate $5, cover us in prayer, or share this podcast with one person, we are so thankful for your participation. The smallest action of support can have a huge ripple effect, so never think that any contribution is too small. We are so thankful for each of you listening. To donate, please go to tarahopealliance.org/donate. If you'd like to reach out to us, please email info@tarahopealliance.org. So you've mentioned experiential therapy. Talk a little bit about what that is. And I know you actually host and lead some retreats and do really cool stuff. And so tell me all about all the cool stuff that you do.
All the cool stuff that I do. Yeah. I love the world of experiential therapy. It's actually something that I got into fairly early on in my career. I started out after doing just kind of private practice and traditional kind of talk therapy. I got a job at this place called the Bridge to Recovery and here in Bowling Green. And they worked with addictions, codependency, anxiety, depression. But it was short-term residential, and they specialized in experiential therapy. And kind of the umbrella experiential therapy definition is that we use different expressive tools, modalities, activities to kind of, it can be to recreate situations from the past, or maybe helping a client get into their body and understand how anxiety manifests, right? Maybe instead of sitting on my couch saying that they're anxious, I'll have them stand up and I'll say, okay, show me, what does that look like, right? Like, how does that manifest in your body? When you feel anxious, show me how your body feels, right? It can go from that to, I did an intensive a couple weeks ago where we needed to do some grief work. And this person, I had a pile of rocks, like big different size stones. And this person had so many different elements of grief. They would go and take this kind of journey across this platform, and they would go get a stone and then hold it and identify a piece of grief that they had, whether it was, a miscarriage or a betrayal from someone, or, whatever it is. They would take that stone and they would make the journey back, and just the experience of identifying, picking something up, holding it, making a journey with it, feeling the weight of it. Just kind of, sometimes it can foster more accessibility to our emotions, right? And so I love experiential in that way. It's a gigantic umbrella. It can include psychodrama, right? If we think about the term of show me, don't tell me, right? Show me what this looks like for you. So that's kind of experiential, kind of in a nutshell. But so I specialize in doing multi-day intensives with people where so for example, next week I'm flying to Mississippi, and I'm going to spend some time with one person who has some trauma work to do. There may be some betrayal trauma there. And so we'll kind of work on family of origin stuff. We will kind of see what, how things were modeled growing up, what they learned from there, what maybe internal messages were there, and how they manifest as, in adulthood.
That is so important. Kind of just like to put a quick pause.
Yeah.
People, I think there's and I understand where this comes from, right? It's the idea that, like, I don't want to blame my parents for everything that's wrong in my life, right? And I agree with that. With that. We as adults have responsibility for our behaviors, period. End of story. Like, take responsibility. But when you go through a healing journey, you have to go back to like how things manifested in your life. Why do I have this belief? Why do I have this behavior? Where did this come from? And a lot of times it happened in childhood. And like, there are a lot of times where it's like not even your parents' fault. Like I give this example all the time, right? Of like an abandonment wound. Like my mom was like leaving for choir. Like she didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Like she didn't do anything wrong, but I'm like screaming, "Mommy, don't leave me," right? And that was the imprint on my nervous system of abandonment, right? Yes. And then you go through life and find proof of other ways that happens, and you're looking for that because you're seeking safety all the time, right? And so I like the and idea, right? Your parents did the best that they could with the information, the tools, and the resources that they had, and they hurt you, and that's okay. Like we understand, it's okay for us to understand that they are human beings, that they made mistakes. Yeah. But what's more important is that we acknowledge like how that manifested so that we can then deal with it. Because if we're going to live in denial to the point where we go, well, they were great. They are, right? Most parents are wonderful, great people who do the best they can. So we want to acknowledge that. I love my parents. They're amazing, etc. Let's say that. And there are things that have come up in my adult life, right? And from that. And so it's okay to have both. And I think if you really want to heal, you're going to be willing to look at whatever you have to look at in order for that to happen.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. That is literally why I have an ampersand tattooed on my wrist, like embracing the and, like both things can be true. In my own life as a partner, when I kind of did my own family of origin work, I had incredible parents. And I had a brother who was terminally ill that, we lived with. He died when he was 32. But based on just watching my parents care for him, I knew it was really hard. It was really taxing on them. So they never said this to me, but I internalized this message of making myself needless and wantless just because they had enough to deal with, right? I didn't want to cause any more stuff, any more chaos, anything for them because they were so good. And they had him to take care of. And he was very demanding time-wise, right? And emotionally, mentally, like he was a lot, and that's not on him. It's just how it was. And so that's what I internalized. And so, my gosh, I can look at that in my own marriage and, early on, putting so much focus on my husband, like when he shared his struggle out at the very beginning in our relationship, it was all about, okay, what can I do to help make this better for you? How can I be your accountability partner? I'm going to take on all these roles. It's going to be all about you. Never recognizing like, hey, hang on, like this is impacting me too. Like I have needs around this, and so it's just a pattern, and that's how it showed up. And so that's why I do love going in and doing that kind of family of origin work, right?
I think because the reality is that we live into those beliefs, whether we want to or not. Exactly. And so if we have these beliefs, and you see this all the time on the addict side as well, right? That's part of the coping mechanism. That's part of what they're medicating it are these negative beliefs and decisions they've made about themselves, that they're not lovable, that they're unworthy, all this kind of stuff. Intimacy is hard, whatever. And but on the betrayed side too, I think this is a really important conversation because I think a lot of times on the betrayed side, there's a fear of doing the deeper work and the actual recovery work because there's sort of a validation in saying, well, my husband did this and it's his issue to do, right?
Yes.
But I honestly have come to the place where I think this is something that like all humans should do, betrayal or no betrayal. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is really like, because we all have these fears, we all have these insecurities. And if you really want to up level in your life and become somebody that lives into the identity of the person that you want to be and living into, who you're supposed to be and accomplishing what you're supposed to accomplish. These fears and these negative beliefs that we have about ourselves, they always hold us back. They always interfere with how we interact in our relationships. They interfere with what we are brave enough to do in life, what we're brave enough to say, what we're brave enough to accomplish, right? And so I think that's really important to say, like, it's not necessarily that you have to do this because your husband was an addict or whatever, but it's like, who do you want to be in life? And what are you, and this may be the catalyst that has thrust you into understanding emotions and limiting beliefs and trauma. But the reality is that everybody has that. Now, again, this is a huge trauma and a catalyst for this healing work. And let's jump wholeheartedly into it at some point, because it's transformational when you actually do the work.
Absolutely. One of the things that I love to do is kind of as clients are identifying that those internal messages, like one of the big questions I ask is how have you coped? And oftentimes I'll have them kind of create and come up with a metaphor, right? Like, simple example, but maybe my life has felt like this tornado, like all this chaos around me, but I try to control what I can. Maybe it's through overfunctioning or, shopping or raging or whatever. But what has that kind of unhealthy coping look like for you? And it kind of helps us identify like the things that I have become powerless over. I've become powerless over my unhealthy coping. And I don't want to live like that anymore, right? Regardless of whether or not my addict, my partner ever decides to change or decides to get into recovery, I still deserve to be well and to be free from this. So what does that look like, right? How do I shift
regardless of what they do, it's okay for you to move forward in the healing journey.
Yes, I still get to be well. I can still choose me, right? I can still choose health.
Man, I feel like we could do like 3 more episodes on like just that, like worthiness and like, right? Yes. Like the negative beliefs, like, oh man, yeah, I'm gonna have you back on.
I did a real quick story. I did a session with an addict. Every now and then I'll get to work with an addict as well. And who's kind of working toward disclosure. And we spent 2 hours on the fact that they struggle to feel worthy. And that's this whole thing. It's like, they're showing up in my office as an adult, but there is this 7-year-old sitting on this couch that tells me that they don't feel worthy.
Yes.
And so that work is so imperative.
I think that is one of the dichotomies when you look at an addict, because the behavior itself comes off as ego.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. It comes off as bravado and ego, and especially when they're like gaslighty and manipulative and all this kind of stuff. But what I've really learned with my husband is just exactly what you said. It is like the wounded child within that, I mean, he feels so much shame and so much unworthiness, and he has so many wounds that contributed to the self-medication. And seeing that, I think that is, I would think be 99 to 100% of addicts would have that somewhere. Yeah.
For sure.
What do you think might be some of the pitfalls or things to maybe watch out for with disclosure or to avoid? Like one of the things that comes to mind when I'm thinking about disclosure is, I talk to women a lot about, you need to know so many details and you need to not know so many details, right? There's something like we don't want to over traumatize ourselves with the information that we get. And so we want to be very clear in the boundaries that we set around the information. And we need to know enough that we're able to have full consent moving forward in the relationship. So
absolutely. Yeah. That's probably another piece of the big prep work that I do is, helping my clients think through exactly what you said, what they want to know versus what they need to know. And so I often encourage them to write out everything. To write out all the questions. I don't care what they are, but get them all out. And we spend often, 2, 3, however many sessions it takes to really kind of workshop that, to go through it. One, because they deserve to ask all of the questions.
Yes.
And I think about emotional questions versus like informational questions, right? What do I need to know to kind of move forward, to start to build trust, to make an informed decision, right?
What are their non-negotiables?
What are their non-negotiables? Absolutely. But it's important that they get out all of their questions, right? And so I like to be able to be that space where they can get all of that out. And once we've gone through the whole list, then we kind of we workshop it and we get down to, okay, these are the need to knows.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And sometimes I'm really hard on them. Like, I'll be really honest. Like, how is that going to be helpful for you to know that?
Yeah.
Right? How is that going to foster your healing? And so, we take the time that it takes to go through those questions.
Yeah, I think that's so important.
I also do kind of a similar thing with the impact letter too. Like, just like the addict has to, go through their disclosure letter over and over, go through the weeds, right, with their own therapist. Like, I'll do the same thing with the impact letter with my partner. Again, I want them to write out everything they need to say, like in every way. How has this impacted you? Get it all out. And we go through a workshopping process there. After they read their initial one to me, then we kind of go through, we try to get out the shaming language if there's any in there, right?
Yeah, because that's not the point. The point is not to shame the partner. The point is to explain how their behavior has impacted you and to really communicate that in clear language.
Right. And that doesn't mean that like they don't need to be able to voice those shaming things. If they need to voice them to me, I will accept it and I will hear it. And like, that's important. Like, get out, like all the things that you need to say, right? Drop all the F-bombs you need to, like, it is fine. Like, my first draft of my impact letter was full of it. Yeah. But that's cathartic, right? Getting it out in that way. And so, but I think that process of workshopping it helps get it down to a place of, hopefully where the addict can receive it.
Yes, because ultimately, as the betrayed partner, you still have to demonstrate to the addict the way you want them to treat the world, which is to treat them as a human being.
Absolutely.
The whole process of getting out of sex addiction is learning how to humanize other people. Right? Beyond processing all of your shame and your pain and all that kind of stuff, it's learning how to humanize other people. And so as the betrayed partner, with all of the valid anger that you have, you don't want to dehumanize your partner. You don't want to keep piling on shame. You want to be honest about how this is making you feel and what your boundaries are. But you need to treat them as a human being as well. And so I think that's such an important point in how you present these things. There are limits. There still are limits. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a delicate, intense process, right? Like the whole thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you do it in a way that, that is nurtured and thought through and supportive, I think it really can be a beautiful process.
And I had a client and her husband go through the impact and restitution letter process recently, and just the shift that it made in their relationship in terms of depth of communication and understanding was so cool to see, because it was like the addict partner was really, I think he came to a new level of understanding how his behavior actually impacted her.
Right.
And so, kind of going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, why do the disclosure? You can continue that question of why do the impact letter? Why do there is a process for a reason. And it's because it really does facilitate healing in the coupleship. And it facilitates communication and it facilitates understanding in a way that a lot of times does not happen if you're just kind of left to your own devices trying to verbalize to each other like what's going on, right? There are a lot of minefields through recovery that you can, right? There's a lot of explosions and pain and so having, like you were saying at the beginning, this safe space and this organized structure and this encouragement and this sort of guidelines, with the counselor, with the coach, with the therapist, whoever you're working with, to kind of guide you and support you through this process. That's so important. And it really, the reason that you're going to go through this is so that you can facilitate the healing on a deeper level, particularly if, you're working towards reconciliation. You might not get to the impact and the restitution if you're not working towards reconciliation, right? Like you may go through disclosure to see where you want to go, but there's a limit there.
There, I love that you said that. The whole thing, it reminds me of, so the pyramid of intimacy, when I think about the disclosure process and that pyramid of intimacy, right? The thing, like, there are these levels that we have to go through to get to true intimacy, and it starts with truth. Right? If I don't have truth, then I don't feel safe. And if I don't feel safe with you, I'm not going to trust you, right? Of like, you just think about that pyramid, and it starts with truth. It's got to be that foundational piece. But then I love that the disclosure really just kind of shows that beautifully, because that's what happens, right? We share truth in this place of safety and support, right? And that is the beginning of rebuilding trust. And if I trust you, I'm going to be vulnerable with you. And that is going to lead to intimacy if it's within this safe setting. And that always leads to deeper connection. And so I love seeing that play out in this process. That's why I love when I've got a couple who, as hard as this is, when they are in it and they are both showing up and doing the work, like, I am seeing this play out, and it is beautiful, and it's so redemptive. And it's such an honor to hold that space and to walk with both partners through this, right? Like, girl, I love this work.
I would agree. Yeah.
I could talk about like all day. Like,
it really is. When you have two people that are willing to do the work, you get so excited.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is so awesome. Yes. I can see the future for you. I know this is hard. I know it sucks right now, but this is great.
But I see the future, and it's so beautiful. Just keep going. Just keep going.
I know, it's so good. I mean, it really is interesting when you work in this area. You really do get a fairly quick understanding when you hear their stories. You're like, oh, okay, like this partner's willing to work and this partner isn't, or that they're both in, and you can I feel like a lot of times you can tell right away like where this is headed, right? And
yes,
so when you see the two that are like totally like, and I mean like 150% like in it to win it no matter what, then you're like,
yes.
Yes, because it really is a process that, I mean, to be quite honest, this sounds painful, and it is, but you really don't want to leave any stone unturned, because that stone eventually is going to be something that just destroys the relationship. And so as hard as that is to like painstakingly go through every step, so important and so worth it, because then you are living in truth, like you said, and that is such a freeing place to be.
Yeah. And I think that's why, going back to kind of the topic, like, prepping for it, that's why it's so important to do all of the pre-disclosure work, right? To really feel safe and secure, and that I can show up in this space, that my partner can show up in this space and be vulnerable and honest. And it's so important to me to foster that kind of environment, like for both people to be able to show up in their vulnerability and their honesty and their strength and their courage and all the things that it takes. Like, it's just, it's important right out the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are so thankful to have you as a coach at TaraHope. I'm so happy to have you on the team. And so I'd love to wrap up this episode just with a question of, whether it's TaraHope or another nonprofit, but we're raising awareness for TaraHope right now. So we're going to ask, why do you think it's important that people consider contributing or donating to things like TaraHope?
Yeah, I love that. It's a great question. Just personally, as someone who I have personally benefited from others' generosity, right? My husband and I could not have gone through our process without the help of someone else donating and giving their own resources to us. Like, that's how we got to do our own intensives and our own disclosure, right? Because we had help. And so I know that on a personal level, the gift that it is. And I mean, we all know this. Therapy is expensive. Treatment is expensive. And that also adds to the stress, right? Of not only do we struggle with being betrayed partners, but we struggle with all of the effects that it takes, right? And all the ways that it impacts us. And financially is one. And so, when people have the willingness to give of their resources to someone like me who is already struggling in this, like, it is a huge gift, and it can be a huge weight off of someone to have that gift of saying, hey, I recognize that you need this, and I want to support you in this way. Like, to be on the receiving end of that is huge, and that's a godsend. And I think that's also just the beautiful example, again, going back to community. And the way that community works, if I have a resource that I can share with you, I want to do it. And say, I support you in this way. I see you, and maybe I don't understand what you're going through, but here's what I can do. And I think that's just the gift and the beauty of community, right? And how community was meant to be.
Yeah. I love that. And talking about community too, those two different types, right? Like, there's the community of the ones that have gone through it and maybe have a desire to pay it forward and support somebody else. And they know the difficulty and they know the financial burden. And so they say, I'm in a good place now. I'm in recovery. I want to support others going through this. And we welcome you to join with us and partner with us. And then maybe there's people that listen to the podcast or are aware of this or have a friend that's going through this and have never experienced anything like it, but you feel called to help people and to contribute in that way. And that we welcome you to partner with us as well. So, I think, it really is any time we're in a position where we're able to help others, it's not just the others that we are helping. You're also going to personally get something out of that as well.
Absolutely.
And you may not know what that is right away, right? Like, you didn't know, like, I don't know how that pillow ended up in your lap, right? Like things happen in mysterious ways, right? Yeah. But anyway, we're so grateful for anyone who's, interested or willing. If you have questions, please reach out. But, Jackie, I am so thankful for you and for your participation with TaraHope and for your coaching and for everything that you're doing in your own business and your own work with clients. If people are interested in connecting with you personally, what's your website or your Instagram or, how can people connect with you if they want to kind of follow you? And
it's a great question. Also, thank you for trusting me to be here and to do this work with your clients. Like it's a gift from me. So, if people have questions, my website is &recoveryandwellness.com. That's how you can find me there. You can also find me at unbridledconnectionkentucky.com. That's an organization that I work with, and I do equine work with partners.
Awesome.
It's a whole other thing I can talk about forever. But you can find me there. Instagram, you can find me at &recovery and wellness. So,
awesome.
So glad to be here, Kylene. It's been so fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast interesting or helpful, it would mean so much if you leave a 5-star review or post a screenshot and share on social media. We are on a mission to share the message of recovery, and you can help get the word out. If you know a friend who could use this podcast, please share it.